Ooh, you didn't tell me you were a brainiac.
Here we go. Welcome into LeatherBrainz, your host here, Slapdog, and I have a crew with me today, a Scotty Del Rey and the Big Yeti himself. Gentlemen, happy Tuesday. It's great to see you guys. I'm excited to talk some football, and of course, there's things to talk about. Before we do that, I do got to give a shout out to our sponsor, Erica's Healthy Pets. Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, I have 2 golden retrievers. I love them dearly, and I want to make sure that they have good, healthy snacks that I can give them. Erica's Healthy Pets is the only place I go to get snacks and treats for my loving dogs. Scotty, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Erica's Healthy Pets?
Yeah, I also got 2 dogs. They're troublemakers. They dig into stuff, and they get fleas and all sorts of things. We live right next to a forest. There are bugs. So whenever they get bug bites or they get little irritants, Erica's Healthy Pet also has a bunch of different oils and stuff that's good for their fur. So overall, great product. It's a USA business based in Texas, and all their orders are shipped right to your door. So you can go to ericashealthypet.com, use promo code LB20 to get 20% off your order today. So go do it.
Go check it out. Let's talk. Let's kick things off here. I feel like this is just a broken record. There's another NFL player that has a DUI. His name is Jordan Addison. He is the Vikings.
Not a Chiefs player.
Not a Chiefs player. But Jordan Addison, second-year wide receiver for the Vikings, was arrested last Friday on suspicion of a DUI in Los Angeles after Highway Patrol was advised that there was a disabled vehicle blocking lanes on Interstate 105. I'd also like to point out that this is not his first run-in with the law in accordance with vehicular issues. In July of 2023, Addison was cited for going 140 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. And I want you guys all to keep this in mind. This was a week after his teammate, Kyrie Jackson, the rookie, I want to say he was a 4th round draft pick this year. He was killed by a drunk driver. So Jordan Addison is doing this a week later. This is absurd. I don't understand, and it really actually it frustrates the shit out of me because why? And it's not even you're an NFL player, right? Like it is, and you're screwing this up. But more importantly, you're threatening the lives of other people. And that's what really frustrates me is not only are you an NFL player, and that's why we're sitting here having this conversation, but at the end of the day, you're potentially harming the lives of others, and I lose a lot of respect for somebody when they do something like that. It frustrates the hell out of me.
Yeah, it's becoming, unfortunately, obviously this is no laughing matter, but it is becoming a recurring segment on our show where Hunter just gets on his high horse and talks to all these kids and says, "Stop fucking up, stop being an idiot." Like we've got like 30 total minutes of Hunter just being the dad to all these NFL players who can't figure it out. Like, just stop. It's 2024. Stop driving drunk. You got a billion options. You're a millionaire. You can have a driver. Like, just don't be an idiot and just be better. Jesus Christ.
At what point do teams look at getting their own personal drivers for some of these players that are either like rookies or 2nd to 3rd year players? Because at this point, it's becoming, as Scotty's kind of said, it's becoming a reoccurring theme that happens every year where there's a high profile, like 2nd year or a rookie having some kind of vehicle issue where they like to go 140 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone, or they're caught under the influence, or they're caught drunk. Like, at what point do the teams say, okay, we're going to get on top of this and we're going to hire drivers for some of these guys because we can't trust them at this point?
Well, the headlines are going to be, Bengals driver caught falling asleep
drinking.
at the wheel.
Shit.
They're going to have to hire drivers for
Addison.
the drivers. Yeah, it's going to be it's like a Russian nesting doll situation, only with drunk driving.
I don't know. I don't know if this is still in place, but I know at one point in time, and I would presume that it still is, but the NFL actually has like an Uber program for the NFL players, so they can Uber for free. And I don't know if that's still in place. I know this was a couple years ago when this was set up, but you have access, and it's not like you can't afford an Uber driver. Like you very clearly can afford an Uber driver, and that shouldn't even be said. Like, we can afford an Uber driver when we're drunk. So it's like, what are you doing? It really just it scratches my head. So I'm gonna ask you guys this: do we see any repercussions from this for Jordan Addison from a playing standpoint? Is he gonna get suspended? Do we think, or is it just gonna be pushed under the rug because the Vikings need him? Like, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I think because this is the second occurrence for Jordan Addison, we'll probably see like a 2-game suspension at this point. You know, that's kind of what we've seen across other suspensions relating to DUIs. It's like couple game hand slap, don't do it again type of thing.
It's almost, you can't even put yourself in his shoes. Can you imagine walking back into the facility like a week after you just lost a teammate to this? Like, you're walking back into this, like, what are your teammates going to say? Like, what are your coaches going to say to you? How do you even address that situation? It's just so stupid, and not only stupid, but like so insensitive to what your program just went through, like literally 7 days ago. It's wild. Yeah,
I think that to me is even worse because you have a family who's mourning the loss of, you know, their son, and that to me is just so it's gut-wrenching. It just rips your heart out. It's like this young man, his dreams came true. He got to go to the NFL, and that got ripped away. Obviously, his whole entire life got taken. And it's like that family is going through some tough stuff, and then that's the headline that comes out a week later. Like, you put yourself in the family's shoes, and that's just terrible, man. It's like, what in the hell are you doing? And I guarantee you that family was like that. They'll never look at Jordan Addison the same. And I feel like if I was one of those players, I'd probably also feel that way. And I'm like, dude, like, are you serious? So terrible stuff. Jordan Addison, be a better human being. Stop being a scumbag. This is just, I don't understand how you can do that. So let's move over to something a little bit happier, guys. Training camp is finally here. That is some good news. That means we are that much closer to NFL football. I think it's like 50 days, 49, 50 days, somewhere on there. So we're getting close, baby, and I am so excited. So the Ravens rookies started training camp this past Saturday, as well as the Bills, Bears, Chiefs, Dolphins, Saints, and 49er rookies reported today. So Texans and Bears, full team report on Friday. Football is near, and I am so freaking pumped. Another headline.
Boys, we're going to have more news other than Jordan Addison being arrested and just kind of relying on these beat writers' stories at this point. Yeah. It'll be Xavier Worthy. He's amazing at Chiefs mini camp or Chiefs training camp. He looks like the real deal. Or
Lay it on me,
Xavier Legette sucks. I can't wait to see all these.
You don't have anything nice for Marvin?
Marvin Harrison looks okay.
That's fucked up, dude.
He's taller than Kyler Murray. That's all we can report at this point.
He's bigger than I thought. Can't wait for
that. There was some news that I don't want to say broke, but it is in regards to the Falcons. There's been a couple headlines that have come out of the Falcons camp as of late in this new Falcons offense. So the Falcons offensive coordinator, Zach Robbins, said he'll find creative ways to get the ball to running back Bijan Robinson, and he draws a comparison of how the 49ers use Christian McCaffrey. I'm not surprised by this. I think that I'm more surprised that Arthur Smith never did do that. So, like, this doesn't seem like headlining news to me. This just seems like a no-brainer move because Bijan Robinson is an uber-talented running back that wasn't really used at all last year in the way that they probably should have. So I guess this gives me a spark of hope that the offensive coordinator actually might know what to do because very clearly Arthur Smith did not. However, I was also kind of confused by something that Zach Robinson had said because he said that he had announced that Kyle Pitts is learning how to play both tight end and the wide receiver position. That is perplexing because if you look at the numbers, Kyle Pitts lined up in the tight end position last season for only 22% of the snaps. So he lined out wide for 29% of snaps and in the slot 49% of snaps last season, meaning that he actually was playing the wide receiver position more than the tight end position. So I don't know, did Arthur Smith just not teach him how to play the position and threw him out there? I'm kind of scratching my head there.
let me clear this up for you. I can explain to you the exact reason why you're confused, because yes, he was lined up in the wide receiver position a lot. The problem is they didn't have a quarterback. So you can't play a wide receiver when you don't have a quarterback. Now they actually have a quarterback, so they have to reteach all these players, oh, this is what you're supposed to do when someone can actually throw you the ball, and it's very important to learn that ahead of the 2024 season. So that's what he's announcing right now. It's very encouraging to see.
And I think Zach Robinson kind of is alluding to Kyle Pitts not being able to block as a true tight end, because Zach Robinson, he is coming over from San Francisco, and notably San Francisco has had a guy named George Kittle there at the tight end position for multiple years now. And George Kittle is a guy who is not afraid to get nasty. I mean, we're going to talk about the receiver series on Netflix here in a little bit, but George Kittle, he was born to be an offensive lineman that basically turned into a tight end. Basically, is how he was raised, is to be a offensive lineman. Like, that was the pride of his family. And Kyle Pitts, he can't block. If you look at his tape over the past few years, he has struggled mightily with run blocking. And I think a lot of the reason why he's starting to flank more outside is because he is a big-bodied guy that is just going to, he's very good with his routes, and he's going to catch balls. He's not going to steal the edge when you need him to, like George Kittle can.
Is this the year? Is this the year?
I was going to ask you, because I think you might have that sticky note laying around somewhere where it's Kyle Pitts or what. I always forget. I want to say Kyle Pitts or bust, but
Kyle Pitts, no matter what.
No matter what.
No matter what all these idiots say about Kyle Pitts, always draft him no matter what. You can take all these fantasy analysts, all the people on the internet that think they know better than you. They don't. Kyle Pitts, no matter what, all the time, always.
Okay, so now that Scotty said that, I'm going to ask you, Yeti. Are you? we're gonna shelve what Scotty said, because there might be some bias there. There's a sticky note floating around. Are you interested from a fantasy perspective? Are you interested in Kyle Pitts this year over the last couple seasons?
I think anybody that says no is a liar, honestly, or they've been hurt time and time again by Kyle Pitts, which I understand the latter portion. If you've gotten your heart broken a couple times, I get it. But I would say with Kirk Cousins coming to the Atlanta Falcons offense, Kyle Pitts I think he's going to be the biggest benefactor of this move. A lot of people point towards Drake London, which I understand. But if you look at Kirk Cousins' history with tight ends, especially, you look at his history with TJ Hawkinson. TJ Hawkinson was the top tight end for a while Kirk Cousins was healthy last year. And I think Kyle Pitts is going to be that guy this year for Kirk Cousins. So I would be more high on drafting Kyle Pitts over like Drake London.
Well, and in all seriousness, from a fantasy perspective, you do have a whole shitload of fantasy players that are like, I'm not touching this guy anymore, which is only going to lower his ADP, only make his value go higher and higher. So in a weird sort of way, it's maybe more than ever Kyle Pitts, no matter what.
Well, you mentioned ADP, and you were talking about Drake London, Yeti. Look, I am a degen. I live, breathe, sleep, and eat fantasy football. And this last weekend, I was like, you know what I haven't done in a while? A mock draft. So I went and did one. Bitch. I know. I went and did one by myself, just computer generated, just to see where people's ADPs were. And Drake London's was very high. I mean, he was middle of the second round, early to middle second round. Is that way too high for Drake London, or is that like a realistic possibility? Because Drake London has never had a finish like that, and you can make the argument that he's never had a quarterback to be able to help him get there. But the Kirk Cousin inflation is very real here. Would you be comfortable drafting him there? Because I can guarantee you Kyle Pitts is later than that.
So Drake London, right now in the underdog ADP, he is going off the board as the 10th wide receiver. That's that's right next to Marvin Harrison Jr. and Chris Olave and Nico Collins. And so when we put those four together, I would say that Marvin Harrison Jr. would be. I agree that he should be above Drake London, but then I would say, yeah, Drake London is probably a good bet to go off the board as a 10th wide receiver come August or September. And I say that because Drake London, when you draft him, you're getting a guy that is an elite wide receiver that just hasn't been with a good quarterback, obviously. Like look at his history since he's entered the NFL. I don't need to tell you the names that he's played with. And Kirk Cousins is an immediate upgrade. And so just due to Kirk Cousins' name, Drake London should be a top 10 wide receiver.
He's got wide receiver 1 upside. I mean, if this offense is as explosive as it could be, he's got wide receiver 1 upside. Now, I tend to be a little bit more shy about him because we know what they want to do with Bijan Robinson. We know they want the offense to flow through him. We know what Kyle Pitts is capable of. So, in kind of a weird way, there's a lot of mouths to feed here. But at the end of the day, if you're sitting there in the second round, you want a wide receiver, you want one with upside, Drake London's not a bad way to go, in my opinion.
Yep, and then Kyle Pitts, he is currently the tight end 6 off the board in underdog drafts, so in best ball formats. So you can get him around, I think, the 5th or 6th round at this point.
Which that's, I mean, from an ADP standpoint, in a very difficult position from a fantasy perspective. The tight end position is a hard position to fill, pun intended. So you have a guy who may be able to give you that advantageous point advantage and that point differential, alongside with the fact that, you mentioned TJ Hawkinson, and it makes me think about how much Kirk Cousins threw the ball when he was with the Vikings. And I don't have the stats in front of me to give you the exact numbers, but he was one of the higher toted quarterbacks for amount of throws he was throwing a game. And so from that perspective, you look at it, I do think Bijan Robinson is going to be a focal point on this team, but let's not forget Kirk Cousins is a gunslinger. That's what he does. And so there will be mouths to feed. And if the Falcons plan on even trying to emulate any of that volume, somebody's going to get catches, somebody's going to get touchdowns, and Drake London and Kyle Pitts are both going to be the benefactors of that.
Well, and the fact that Bijan Robinson is such a talented receiving back too means they're not limited to just handing him the ball. Their run plays versus pass plays, they can lean more into the passing game because of Bijan Robinson, which means more opportunities for everyone.
Smells like some play action, baby. Okay, let's go over to Lamar Jackson. Let's talk about Lamar Jackson. He won the best play at the ESPYs. I don't know if anybody has seen this play, but it is a pretty cool play. He caught his own deflected pass against Kansas City in the AFC Championship game. Yeah, sorry to say it, Scotty.
Against the AFC Championship game that they lost, there were many more impactful plays during that game that were, obviously it was a cool play, but it's like the best play of the year. I don't know about that. You guys remember when Will Levis threw an interception and then just took it back immediately? Like that. Yeah. That should. If we're just going to be giving it to cool plays that have no impact on the season or the game, that one was sweet. That
one, I will not forget that, because Will Levis looked like he was so mad that he threw that pick and he just ran at the guy, and it was a good hit. Whatever. I didn't watch the ESPYs. Congratulations, Lamar. Yeah, don't care. What I do care about, though, is the show Receiver. I don't know if have you guys had the opportunity to watch the entire show? Because I'm going to say I haven't. I'm only 2 episodes in. I'm a busy guy. I've been a little busy recently.
But that's
okay.
Spoilers.
That's okay.
Yep.
I'm fine with spoilers. I understand. I had my time, and I haven't been able to watch all of it. However, there were some things that I also am aware of. And I have seen some of it, have not seen all of it, but I'm kind of aware of most of the narratives at this point and those spoilers. So, Davante Adams, let's start with him. That was one of the funniest clips I have seen in a while. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Davante Adams upset receiver, and it will show up. He was notably pretty upset most of the season. And yet he is a Raiders fan. I'm really interested to hear about this from your perspective. He hated Jimmy G with a passion, which I also hate Jimmy G with a passion, which makes me love Davante. I hate that guy. I think he's terrible. I think he was a bad quarterback.
Seems like a nice guy.
He's handsome as hell. I'll give him that. He is a good looking dude, but not a good quarterback. Not a good quarterback. I was saying that when he was with the 49ers, and then the Raiders got him, and I'm like, this was a bad move for you, because Jimmy G is not a good quarterback. And the only thing that he had going for him was Kyle Shanahan, and a systematic offense was enabling him to have some success. He went to the Raiders, he played with Josh McDaniels, and it was an absolute dumpster fire, and Davante Adams was pissed. In fact, Davante Adams kind of pretty much came out and said, like, I had a part in Jimmy G getting benched. And There was a clip where Davante Adams it was a ball that was severely overthrown when Davante Adams was pretty open. And Devontae Adams got really pissed. I mean, he was throwing his helmet down on the sideline. He's like, this is fucking bullshit. I got to get out of here. And he's like, I got to get out of here before I lose my life, was the quote. And while that might seem a little drastic, I don't think a lot of people realize how much a quarterback really dictates how hard and how often a wide receiver can get hit. Because if you throw the ball behind him or you throw the ball into traffic, you could potentially be setting that wide receiver up for a very punishing hit. And that seems to have happened quite a bit. And he wasn't protecting his wide receivers as well as he probably should have been, namely Devontae Adams. So yeah. I loved that. I thought it was great. And he also didn't like Josh McDaniels. So far, Devontae Adams, he gets a gold star from me. Yeti, you're nodding your head. You agree?
Yeah, he's echoing everything that Raiders fans said throughout this whole season, basically. And one thing that I thought was interesting that Devontae Adams said in the receiver series is that Jimmy G, he went to the Raiders with a broken foot. He had an offseason procedure that made him miss all of training camp, all of mini camp. So him and Devontae Adams didn't get any reps together, which was extremely evident right off the bat, right? Like, we all saw, if you watch the Raiders game, which I know you all did, we all saw that Devontae Adams and Jimmy G were never on the same page in the 6 or 7 games that they played together. And that you could see that with Devontae Adams' frustration. Before Devontae Adams went to the Raiders, before they lost Derek Carr, Devontae Adams was a very even keel guy. You wouldn't hear anything from him basically, except, basic, players.
We got to do better.
We got to do better, basically. But there was times throughout the season where he was like, this just looks terrible. We're winning, but this offense looks terrible. And a lot of people came at him like, oh, you're selfish. What do you mean? You guys won. Why do you care what it looks like? Well, I mean, he had a point. The Raiders offense under Josh McDaniels was averaging 18 points a game. Devontae Adams was touching the ball 4 times a game, 5 times a game, and averaging 60 yards receiving through when McDaniels was there. And so things obviously were not pretty. And I think the icing on the cake for Devontae Adams was when in Josh McDaniels' last game, Devontae Adams had 1 target at halftime. I can't remember the game. I try to wipe all the Raiders stuff off of my mind. But Devontae Adams had 1 target at halftime going into one of their biggest games. And Devontae Adams was like, okay, all right, fuck you. I'm done.
Let me ask you this, because there's some chatter going on over on Twitter that they're saying that Devontae Adams is going to get traded. He's going to go to the Jets. Is that a realistic possibility? Whether it's a Jets or not, I guess that I don't know if I'm necessarily bought in on. But we've kind of had this conversation a little bit in the past about the future of Devontae Adams. Do you believe that there's a very real possibility that the Raiders move on from him and try and get some value down the stretch?
Let me take this one before we get Yeti's expert perspective, because from an outsider's view, and even watching receiver, you also get this impression that toward the end of the season, when those changes were made, when AOC came in and when they got the new coach set up, it seems like Devontae Adams was like, all right, I'm bought back in. And now the Raiders organization is like, he's a Raider for life, this sort of thing. I don't know if that's true, but it seems like the whole organization is like, okay, we're back on the right foot. Let's get going. And I think Devontae Adams probably has that same mindset where he's like, I want to do this here. And now that we're moving in the right direction, I'm encouraged about that. So I think there's a good chance Devontae Adams stays put.
Yep. I echo everything
throughout the whole season.
Yeah. Yep. I do think so. Unless for some god awful reason that the Raiders go up to the trade deadline if they're 3-8 or something like that. I could see them being all right.
Raiders have a great defense, but
yep,
a rebuild is coming, is it not? Or at least a light rebuild of sorts. I think it's no surprise.
What are you talking about, man? Come on.
God, I hope you have more of a realistic perspective than that. Michael Penix was supposed to go to the Raiders, right? That was supposed to happen, and obviously it didn't, and now you have Bowers, but let's not forget that the quarterback position is one that is definitely going to need to get figured out sooner rather than later. And I don't necessarily mean this season, because I think this season it's going to just be, let's figure it out as we go. But neither of the quarterbacks that you have are a long-term solution. So you've got that to figure out, as well as an aging wide receiver 1. Jacoby Myers is not the guy. You lost Josh Jacobs, so you have a young Zamir White. And there's just a lot of different moving pieces here that you don't have any. From my perspective, as somebody who's not a Raiders fan, there's a lot of green here. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of new, and there's also not a lot of direction as far as how this is going to play out. That's my perspective. And so couldn't you make the argument that in the event that maybe not 3-8, because you guys do have a very good defense, but in the event that you start out rather lackluster and the trade deadline's coming up, you say, you know what? We know we're not going to go anywhere with this. Let's take a 3rd-round pick and send Davante Adams to a team that's needy for him because we know that we're not going to be able to accomplish what we need to while Davante Adams is still here.
You know, none of us are general managers here, unfortunately. And yeah, we all should be, honestly. I think we'd all make pretty good general managers. But I think every NFL GM right now is probably thinking the same exact thing. And they're probably just waiting until later on in the season to the point where, like, if the Raiders are struggling, I'm going to go offer the Raiders a 5th-round pick for Davante Adams, where the Raiders have zero leverage because Davante Adams is going to be 31 or 32 years old at that point in the season. We know that he probably wants out of the Raiders if they are struggling at that point. So we're going to lowball the Raiders and see what we can get. And so I think if I'm the Raiders general manager, I'm just going to be stubborn. And unfortunately, Davante Adams, you're going to retire as a Raider because we need you on the team if we're going to do anything. And even if we're struggling, we need you because you are our offense at this point.
He's just going to pull a Gronk. You just retire and then come
he's
back
just
and
gonna
play for the
threaten
Chiefs
to retire
next year.
I don't know. It's one that's interesting. I haven't made it all the way through receivers. So is there anything else that stood out for you guys watching this show that really kind of hit home for you?
Yeah, I want to talk about the Lions. You guys know I'm a world-renowned Lions fan. I love Dan Campbell. I love everything about their culture. I think they were doing a great job. But
Are you
is
it Scotty?
Yeah, that was all a lie, by the way. Well, it's not a lie that I'm a fan of the team because I do think that this team is very good. I've been very consistent on that. And
New
one of the
season,
things
new Scotty.
Yeah, not that name.
I like that mentality. Let's go. Say some more nice things about the Lions.
I will say some nice things about the Lions because I do think from a realistic perspective, just given the recent history of the franchise, like when you're watching the receiver show and you're watching Amon-Ra and you're watching Dan Campbell and all the Lions organization talk to each other, it's very clear that their goal was to make the playoffs. Like, I think what we saw from the Lions last year with their offense and their defense was good enough. Like, they could have been a legitimate Super Bowl team. Like, they were a few bad calls away from being a Super Bowl team. But I don't think they started the season with that mentality. And now that they've done it, now that they've made the playoffs, now that they've gone to the biggest stages, I think this year I'm very afraid of the freaking Lions. I think the Lions are going to be so good because they're all going to come in with the right mentality. Amon-Ra, and we all know this, but in the documentary they talk about it a lot. He said, if we make the playoffs, I'm going to dye my hair blue. It's like, okay. I get it. That's cool. But making the playoffs is not your fucking goal. Like, you should be chasing a ring. And they just didn't have that mentality going into last year. And it's hard to blame them just given the franchise history. But that's not going to be a mistake they're going to make again. And watching that documentary, I'm like, oh, shit. Like, these guys are going to be really good in 2024.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you this question then, because I know we've had our disputes about Dan Campbell. And we've had our disagreements about Dan Campbell. But do you think that, and somebody who hasn't watched receivers yet, so I haven't gotten to see all of, like I said, 2 episodes in, have you gotten, you mentioned like the mentality for all of these Lions, the entire organization was to get to the playoffs. Do you think, or do you expect Dan Campbell, we've talked about the issues that he's had coaching and some of the mistakes he's made. Do you think we see some of that get polished up this season and that gets fixed as well?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, Dan Campbell, is, as much shit as I talked about him, he's a new head coach. I mean, he's been doing it for a few years. This will be his 4th year now, I believe, and he made a lot of mistakes, but obviously a lot of great things about this organization. And just given the way that they lost the games that they lost last year, where I think you can look at almost every single loss from 2023 and point to a call that Dan Campbell made during the game and said that had a really big impact on that loss. And I think going through a season like that, there's a very good chance that he comes back. He can still be aggressive. You can still go for it on 4th down, but just make smarter decisions. Don't let the flow of the game dictate your decision-making as much as analytics and knowing your guys. And so I think he could still be a coach that goes for it on 4th down more than anybody else. Just polish up the stupid ones. And I think as long as he doesn't step in the way with that decision-making and he does improve on that front, there's no reason to think the Lions aren't going to be awesome.
I don't know if St. Brown was covering up for Dan Campbell at all in the documentary, but St. Brown did say that he loved Dan Campbell because he trusted his offense to go get the job done. Because all the players knew that they were going to go for it on fourth down because of Dan Campbell. And so I don't know what changes are going to have to be made for Dan Campbell to realize, hey, maybe I should be smarter, because right now the team is all looking at Dan Campbell as like, oh, fourth down, we're going for it. We're going for it no matter what the circumstances at this point. Like, I don't know if the general manager needs to step in and be like, hey, Dan, look back at the championship game and look at some of those decisions you made. Maybe you need to reevaluate when and how you go for it on fourth down.
Yeah, and I do think, just to add before you jump in, Hunter,
No, go ahead.
just to add to that, I think that, most of those conversations that were had with the Lions players about that, in particular Amon-Ra, he's looking at the season as a whole. But when you focus in on those key moments, especially in the championship game, we're like, okay, maybe that wasn't the right decision. I think the players recognize that, and the moment those decisions start resulting in losses instead of wins, because the Lions are a great offense. They can get a lot of fourth down conversions, and so it makes sense that they would have confidence in that. But once the players start saying, okay, we shouldn't have gone forward here, that cost us this game, they're going to be more understanding of taking a more conservative approach to fourth downs. And I think everyone in the organization is going to come to that conclusion. I think it's still going to be exciting. Lions fans don't have to worry about their team being boring all of a sudden, but I do think it's going to be more polished.
I also don't know if I don't think we'll stop seeing them go for it on fourth down.
Right.
I think it'll just be in more key moments of the game. There were a couple where the Lions were on their own 35-yard line and they're going for it, and it's like, okay, well, maybe we don't need to do that. But if you're kind of in that territory where you could kick a field goal, or you're kind of right out of the zone for a field goal, we all know what I'm talking about, that area, yeah, maybe going for it is the right call. And so I still think we'll see him go for it. And honestly, without seeing receivers, what you're saying, Scotty, I would prefer that if I was Dan Campbell in the Lions organization, because at the very least, all your players are bought in, and that, I feel like that would be a very difficult thing to do as a head coach and as an organization, is to have all your players buying into what you're selling them. And, we talk about Devontae Adams. He very clearly wasn't bought in on what Josh McDaniels was selling him, and he wasn't bought in on Jimmy G. And so you have a shift there, right? You see two sides of the coin, and it's like, well, yeah, you're going to want to be on the Lions side, because at the very least, everybody is bought in, and they are all trying to work for that success together, versus I need to get the hell out of here because I'm gonna die because my quarterback's that bad. So
it's easy to
interesting.
It's easy to get the team bought in when it's working, and
Sure.
It worked for a lot of the time. But then we saw at the end of the season when it didn't work, and that's where you start running into those culture problems. Everyone raves about Dan Campbell and his ability to build a culture, but we can't forget this team was winning a lot. It's very hard to fuck up your culture when you're winning a lot. Look at Bill Belichick. It seems like all the players, half the players hated him. They hated interacting with him. But guess what? When they were winning championships, nobody gave a shit. That culture was great because they were like, this guy knows what he's doing. So it's easy to build a culture when you're winning. Now that they've run into some of those hardships that cost them the ability to get to the Super Bowl, I think everyone's going to temper their expectations and be a little bit more conservative. Not too much, but a little bit.
It is also worth noting, too, like you mentioned, the last time the Lions were good was 30 years ago. So to be able to see the success that they have now, obviously anybody's going to want to be a part of that going into next season too. So I'm excited for them. And the Lions were my underdog team last year. They were, before week one, I was
underdog anymore.
They're not. They're not. So now I got to pick a new underdog team. So stay tuned, because I'm brewing one up this year, I think.
Cardinals.
I'd love to say the Cardinals. I think we're going to be good this year. I think we're going to be 8-9. And that's good. I just want to see improvement. That's all I'm really looking for. I want to see Marvin Harrison do well. I want to see Kyler come back, look healthy, and this offense start clicking. Kyler came back halfway through last year. His leg was all bummed up from the ACL. And we didn't have wide receivers. So I'm interested to see how this year goes. I'm tempering expectations, but I think I have some other teams that I'm brewing up behind the scenes here that I'm going to be my Lions team of last year. So we'll see.
Before we move on from the receiver documentary, I do want to talk about Deebo Samuel, because Deebo was obviously a huge part of this documentary. Him and George Kittle, they were both on this documentary, so the 49ers were well covered in this series here.
Spoiler alert, they lost the Super Bowl.
Damn.
I love that
I had
episode.
no idea.
Damn, that's fucked up.
But I with all the offseason conversations that we have had and other media platforms have had about the 49ers letting go of Deebo Samuel, I think those rumors need to be put to bed after watching this documentary, because you'll see very quickly that Kyle Shanahan and this 49ers offense goes as far as Deebo Samuel goes. And it's not only for what he does on the field, but all of his contributions off the field as well. He has the ultimate respect in the locker room from everybody around him, and people look to him when they're slacking. Like, he is their energy guy, and he gets shit done. And he takes responsibility for like this offense slacking off as much as they did. I know last year the 49ers, they went on that 3-game skid, and that was notably because Deebo Samuel wasn't a part of that offense. But as soon as he came back from his shoulder injury, they came out and they smoked the Jaguars, and they looked like the dominant team that were going to win the Super Bowl at that point. Obviously they didn't, but with Deebo Samuel in that offense, they're always going to be favorites.
Yeah, I'm interested what you guys think about this, because when I was watching that documentary, obviously that's the message that you got. But I also got the message, like, with all of the information we have now about the Brandon Ayuk stuff, it seems like at the beginning it could have been either one of these receivers that was on the hot seat. Now it seems like obviously it's Ayuk. One thing that really boggles my mind is, like, the reason I think Deebo Samuel could have been on the hot seat is because of the way he's used in this offense and his injury-prone nature, especially after last season. He missed a lot of time, and that was a big part of the documentary. Like, look how bad we suck without Deebo Samuel. We build our entire offense around this guy, and we use him like a running back pretty much, and so he gets injured like a running back. And he also missed time in the championship game. They very well could have lost that game when they were down 24 points in the first half or whatever it might be. So it's like, watching it, I'm like, okay, it makes sense that they want to keep Deebo around, but also, are they investing in really a liability as opposed to reforming their offense around a guy who's maybe a little bit less injury prone because of the way that they use him? It's kind of a double-edged sword, and it was interesting to me that now, in light of all of the Ayuk stuff, it's like, no, they're investing in this guy, and they're just holding their breath that he's able to stay healthy.
I think there's two veins of thought for me. Is one, I understand what you're saying, and yeah, I think that there should be some concern there, but the other part of it is, well, damn, Kyle Shanahan really knows what he's doing, because, and which is kind of a silly thing to say, because you do run the risk of everything that you just mentioned, but Kyle Shanahan knows what he has with this player, and he knows that he is not one-dimensional. He's not two-dimensional. He's three-dimensional. You can put him almost anywhere on the field, and he is an incredible asset for the team. And I think that goes to speak of Kyle Shanahan not only recognizes that, but tries to get him involved in different ways to mix up his offense. You know, like, you look at and this is going to be a terrible comparison, so take it with a grain of salt, but somebody like Justin Jefferson is not lining up in the backfield, right? And that's not to say that Justin Jefferson isn't an incredible athlete, but that just goes to show the uber talent that is Deebo Samuel, where he can line up in the backfield, and you can put him out wide, or you can put him in the slot. Like, you can move this guy around. That's so hard for a defense to cover. That is so incredibly hard. So I think for me, Kyle Shanahan recognizes what a talent he is. And yeah, obviously, we say it all the time, we don't root for injury. And I guarantee you the 49ers are praying that Deebo stays healthy. But at some point, he's going to fall off the cliff, just like every other NFL player does. And you hope that that's not this season or the next season, but you know that at some point it will. So what can we do with this guy while we have him to improve our offense that much more? So, and you look at somebody like Brandon Ayuk. I think Brandon Ayuk's a good receiver. I don't think Brandon Ayuk is a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL, and that's kind of the contract that he's looking for. And the 49ers very clearly aren't willing to pay him like a top 10 wide receiver, A, because they don't have the money, but B, also because they recognize that he's not a Deebo Samuel. And so I tend to agree with you. I don't think, and we've already seen what the 49ers are indicating as far as the future that they want here for Brandon Ayuk. With or without him, they're going to keep moving along, and that's why they drafted Pearsall. That's why, they're like, if you want to sit out, that's your own prerogative. And we've talked about this before, and I agree with Yeti. He said that if Ayuk sat, it would be detrimental to his future, because all it's going to do is showcase how much the 49ers don't actually need him. And I think having somebody like Deebo certainly exemplifies that even more.
Mm.
And we've seen how much the 49ers need Deebo Samuel. Just look at last year. They lost 3 games without him on the field. And I think if the 49ers had drafted somebody similar to Deebo Samuel's skill set, like a Xavier Legette, who's kind of built like Deebo Samuel, like a running back that's playing wide receiver, I think we'd be sitting here and saying, like the time's ticking for Deebo Samuel. But the fact that they went and got a guy in Ricky Pearsall who is basically cut from the same cloth as a Brandon Ayuk, that's where it's like, okay, Ayuk's time is really ticking here. Like, this is probably his last year as a 49er.
Sad.
Is it? I don't feel sad. I'm not. You're not a 40. None of us are 49ers fans. And honestly, like I said, I think Brandon Ayuk is a good wide receiver, but I don't think
he's probably still going to get paid a shitload of money.
Oh, for sure.
Oh yeah,
so
he will.
There's lots of people who will pay him.
Which good for him. But like, the 49ers, I think, recognize. You know, it's kind of like the whole Jimmy G thing, and I think Brandon Ayuk is a much better football player than Jimmy G, but this still stands where Jimmy G went and got the starting job as the Raiders quarterback, and I'm sitting here scratching my head saying, Josh McDaniels, what do you see in this guy? What do you think that this guy is capable of to lead your offense anywhere?
Lust.
Yeah, it had to have been. The sexual tension in that locker room was probably insane. But he's not a good quarterback. And I think that's because of Kyle Shanahan. And so maybe you start to see a little bit of that with Brandon Ayuk if he goes to another team as well, as a team starts to see some of the things that Brandon Ayuk might not possess. And you hope that they would do their homework and their due diligence before they pay a guy. But I'm not going to sit here and say all NFL front offices and GMs are smart individuals, because we saw.
They also got to get ready to play Brock Purdy and make him the highest paid quarterback in football, because eventually that's going to happen. So they got to structure the whole team around that inevitability at this point.
Is Brock Purdy going to be the first $60 million quarterback?
Maybe.
I hope
he might be. From Iowa State to Mr. Irrelevant to the highest paid football player ever. What a story.
I mean, Brock Purdy's a good quarterback. I think, like, if there's anybody out there that thinks Brock Purdy's not a good quarterback, you're blind or you're dumb. Like, those are the two things, because Brock Purdy is a good quarterback. He's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. But I still don't think he's worth $60 million a year when you look at some of the other guys from a talent perspective.
They won't have a choice.
Dude, I said this on a podcast during the last postseason. I said, you can say what you want about Brock Purdy, but Brock Purdy is a winner. Yeah. You turn on the tape on Brock Purdy, and he just figures out a way to get it done. He scrambles in the pocket. He'll step up in the pocket, make all the throws that he needs to make to go out and win games. And if I'm a franchise looking for a quarterback, I would pay Brock Purdy $60 million a year.
Okay,
this dude just knows how to get it done.
You know, I love games. I'm like Jigsaw over here.
Yep.
If you have Patrick Mahomes, you have
Brock Purdy, easy.
Aiden O'Connell and or Gardner Minshew. If either of your teams needed a quarterback right now, would you rather have Justin Herbert or Brock Purdy?
Oh God.
That's tough.
That is a very, very good question.
You know how many Justin Herbert has now 7 games under his belt where he's had a game tying or game leading drive in the fourth quarter or overtime, and they still lost the game.
And I heard Justin Herbert's arm is shrinking, so I got to go Brock Purdy.
Valid point.
Doctors, yeah.
He's not.
LeatherBrainz.com. Go check out that article. It is scary.
It is.
All right, so you're both taking Brock Purdy?
Startling.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Brock Purdy or Trevor Lawrence?
Brock Purdy.
Yeah, Brock Purdy.
Okay. I was going to make a joke and say Brock Purdy or Daniel Jones, but I'll pivot there. I'll say Brock Purdy or I was going to say CJ Stroud. Yeah, I'll say CJ Stroud, but I think you guys will say Stroud.
Yeah.
Stroud.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. We'll do one more. Brock Purdy or Jared Goff?
I still think I would go with Brock Purdy.
Yeah, not taking longevity into account. Either way, I think
we're saying a 3-year window.
Yeah, I'd still go Brock Purdy. I think he's got more upside.
Okay, I agree. I was curious.
Big Brock Purdy fans here.
Yeah, hey man, Mr. Irrelevant. The story in and of itself is just it grabs at the heartstrings of America. So, or at least NFL
Hallmark
fans.
Movie in the making.
It really is. Speaking of Hallmark movies.
I was gonna spin it off, but you go for it.
Well, I was just gonna talk about. Did you guys see that Andy Reid is gonna be in that movie for the Chiefs Hallmark movie that's coming out?
What? As Santa? Are you gonna make him Santa?
I really hope so. There's actually gonna be a couple of Chiefs players in it. Andy Reid's gonna be in it, and I'm fingers crossed he plays Santa Claus.
I wish they wouldn't do this. There's never been a good Hallmark movie.
In it?
Mecole Hardman.
Oh my god.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be in it. They're going to make appearances, is what the article said.
Yeah, I just don't care. I just wish they'd keep their shitty movies away from my football team.
I kind
They
of
should
like
have
it.
Kadarius
Go
Toney
do this
as
with
the
the
Grinch.
Chargers. They
Yeah,
need
they
the
should have.
publicity.
He's just got the long fingers, and they're just covered in oil.
He's Krampus.
Yeah. Let's round this thing off with the last thing I'd like to talk about today. The 12 teams that could actually win the next Super Bowl. So Connor Orr of Sports Illustrated recently wrote an article about 12 teams that he thinks could actually win the Super Bowl. He writes this article every year, and he stated that this was the hardest year yet, which honestly, I kind of agree with that. At least in the last couple of years, it's hard. There's a lot of good teams here. So the teams that he chose from the AFC were the Chiefs, Bills, Jets, Ravens, Bengals, Browns, and Texans. So we'll start there for the AFC. All those teams deserve to be on that list, and is there any AFC teams that are missing?
The Bills jump out at me as a team that's like, oh, there's a pretty big question mark there. I don't know how that offense is going to look. So I think if I were to put them in order, I don't even know if I want to do that.
You don't have to put them in order.
Yeah, well, the Chiefs, obviously, just because no matter what their offense or their roster looks like, it seems like they can be competitive and do it, as we've seen. The Jets, if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, yeah, I agree. So I think I agree with this list. The Bengals, Joe Burrow has just got to stay out of the ICU, and then that team could do it too. Browns,
Browns were really good last year with like a second-string team, and I think some people forget that. Like Nick Chubb, I don't know if you saw, but yesterday he was squatting like 500 pounds, and the bar was bending, and this was 9 months post-leg getting almost torn off his body. Yeah, like... So you were missing Nick Chubb. Deshaun Watson was in and out last year. The whole team was kind of like a second-string offense, and their defense really held it together.
Deshaun Watson's the question mark, though. We haven't seen him do it. So that's why I guess putting him on the list that they could do it, yeah, if Deshaun Watson looks like Texans Deshaun Watson, sure. But we haven't seen that yet. I don't know if he's capable of doing that.
I agree. I think that's the big question mark. I think if I was to pick any team I would remove from this list, it would be the Bills. I think the Bills are going to struggle significantly this year, and I think a lot of people are riding the high that is Josh Allen. I'm not going to sit here and say Josh Allen is not he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. It's him and Patrick Mahomes stand out as the two best quarterbacks in the NFL for me. But nobody's talking about the Bills' defense. The Bills lost half their defense this last year in the offseason. So how in the world do you expect to win games when you don't have Jordan Poyer gone? The D lineman, whose name is currently escaping me. I can't remember his name. This is
honestly,
me.
This team was just injured so much throughout the season too that part of me is like, yeah, you lose half your defense, that makes it hard. The other part of me is like, if you replace them with guys who don't get injured and can play the entire season, it might be better. Like they might.
You
end
also
up being
lost both
a
your wide
better
receivers.
defense.
Like you, and I'm not saying Gabe Davis is the best wide receiver in the world, but he was a tenured guy who's now gone. Stephon Diggs gone. You have Keon Coleman as a rookie wide receiver, and I can't even think of the other wide receivers that the Bills picked up this offseason.
Khalil Shakir,
Curtis Samuel.
Curtis Samuel, thank you.
Yep.
Like this is a completely different team. And I don't think the Bills are going to be great this year. I think Josh Allen is going to make them relevant, but I don't think they're going to be a Super Bowl contending team. So I would remove the Bills from this list. For the
I will
AFC.
say, one thing I want to say about the Bills real quick is when they made the switch over to Joe Brady as their offensive coordinator, this offense looked completely different than the offense that we are used to seeing over the past 3-4 years with Josh Allen. This team was a very run focused offense, not just with Josh Allen's legs. They did run him more, but they also used James Cook.
Yeah,
I think James Cook, he has emerged as one of the top running backs in the league, whether people want to believe it or not. Yeah, shout out to Slapdog for riding the James Cook bandwagon, 2 years ago because he's Dalvin Cook's brother.
I was
love you, Slaps.
I was telling you guys.
Joe Brady, he's also running a lot of 2 tight end looks, and this offense is going to be slower. I don't mean that from like a team speed.
Like more methodical, you mean?
But yeah, their offense is going to be more methodical. And I think sometimes when you slow down your offense and you have these long drives, these 7 to 9 minute drives where you're scoring points, that gives your defense a lot of time to recover. And obviously, sometimes the best defense is your offense, right? And I think Joe Brady is going to give that offense a big boost, and they're not going to have to rely on Stephon Diggs anymore, the prima donna on their team. So I think the Bills I think they deserve to be on this list still. But if we did replace them, I would replace them with the Dolphins.
I was just going to say, where's the Dolphins at?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people forget that the Dolphins had a lot of key injuries towards the end of the season. They were playing with freaking practice squad D linemen, basically, when they went to Kansas City. Not making any excuses because they sucked in that game, but like their defense was torn apart.
Yeah, the Dolphins are going to be interesting this year for sure because they're capable. Like, you look at these offensive weapons, you look at this team as a whole, and you're like, this team could be the, as we saw at the beginning of last season, this could be the most powerful offense in the NFL. Like, this team could put up 40 points a game, or
70.
Yeah. Well, they're not the Raiders. The Raiders could put up 63 points a game. We saw that, but they could also put up 9 yards of total offense, as we saw the Raiders do too. So.
Hey,
they run the gambit. But yeah, I think the Dolphins very well should be on this list. Probably over the Bills, and I would say probably over the Browns too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Let's go over to the NFC here. So the NFC teams that Connor had put in his list are the 49ers, the Rams, the Lions, the Packers, and the Eagles. Don't see any Cardinals in there, but that's okay.
Maybe
next year. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with any of those NFC teams. I think they're all like, the NFC is a little bit easier of a conference than the AFC, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, all these teams are contenders. The Packers, interesting, which I agree. I think the Packers should be on this list. I think if you watch the first 6 games of the Packers last season with Jordan Love, everybody's sitting there saying, is he the future? And then the rest of the season, you're like, oh my God, they did it again. It's Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers and now Jordan Love. And Jordan Love's the guy, and he's a good quarterback. And that team is the fun thing about the Packers is that whole offense is so young. It's so young. Like, they're not paying any major contracts aside from like Josh Jacobs. Like, and some of their offensive linemen. Like that's it. All those wide receivers are on rookie contracts. They're all doing great. They're going to have to pay Jordan Love here, but they deserve to be on this list, I think. I think that the Packers, which is probably very frustrating. It's interesting. The Lions, obviously, we kind of covered them a little bit earlier, but the NFC North, that whole division is just that's the hardest division in NFL football right now.
Yeah.
The Bears, who have some question marks with Caleb Williams, but that roster is completely loaded, and then you have the Vikings with a rookie quarterback as well, and there's a lot of question marks there and what that looks like. And then you have the Packers and the Lions. I would hate to be in the NFC North because that is just a gauntlet of a division. But do you guys think all these 5 teams, the 49ers, Rams, Lions, Packers, and Eagles, should all be on this list?
One thing about the Packers I want to say real quick is Week 7 they play the Texans, and my God, I'm juiced up for that game already because we're seeing the 2 best young quarterbacks in the league play each other.
Where's that game at? Do you have the schedule up?
Yeah, it is in Green Bay, so it's at Lambeau
You want to make a road trip?
Yeah, I'll bring baby on my shoulder. That'll be fine.
Oh yeah, I forgot you're gonna be a dad.
Yeah,
you can be my dad for that weekend.
Oh, daddy.
He'll call you daddy.
But I do think 2 more teams deserve to be on the NFC side. I think the Cowboys deserve to be on this list, as well as the Falcons. If the Jets made his list, then I think the Falcons should be on this list.
I'd agree with that.
No-brainer at this point, because with the Jets, you're relying on the health of Aaron Rodgers. Falcons, you're relying on the health of Kirk Cousins. The Falcons, they play in the NFC South, so they play in the NFC South. Do I need to say anything else about the NFC South?
Division.
Right. So they're guaranteed to go to the playoffs, and I think any team that makes the playoffs is a Super Bowl contender. Obviously, some are more contender-ish than other teams, right? But look at the Giants when they had Eli Manning. Like, they snuck in as the last team in the playoffs, and they went on to win the Super Bowl twice that way. So I think I hate saying nice things about the Cowboys, but they had one of the best offenses in the league last year. I mean, you take away their playoff game against the Packers, and they had a really good season. It's just a matter of can they put it together in the postseason. Which
well, and I think that's Connor
huge
took that
question.
took that into account because they never have in the last X amount of years. So
Connor's
he's like, I'm
the
just not gonna
Cowboys
put
are
them
pretty
on.
good, but they're gonna suck round one. So.
First round, they're out.
Yeah.
I do like the Falcons, and I do agree. I think the Falcons should be on this list. They deserve to be on this list if the Jets do, and I think that's a really good comparison because I think that you're comparing apples to apples there, and you're both teams are saying we need our quarterbacks to stay healthy, and if they can, we're going to compete. And if they can't, well, then we're probably going to. I mean, we saw the Jets last year without Aaron Rodgers, and it was tough. It sucked. I was really excited to watch that team, and 4 plays in, everything changed. And I think the same could be said about the Falcons if Kirk Cousins can't stay healthy. So I really do. I think that's a very fair comparison. Scotty, you agree with all that?
Yeah. I want to ask you guys a question. If you obviously remove your teams from the equation, but what's your ideal Super Bowl matchup?
I think for me, I would be really interested to see the Ravens versus, I want to say, the Eagles. Just because I think it would be a lot of fun to see those two teams are extremely balanced. And I think when we look at their rosters from 1 to 52, you're like, wow. Like on paper, these teams are stacked. And if they can all stay healthy, that would be one of the best Super Bowl games.
I don't want to see that. I don't. No. Sorry, I don't want to see the Eagles. I'm done with the Eagles. I'm done. I'm out. I'm done with them.
It would be pretty cool to see Saquon Barkley win a Super Bowl with the Eagles. That would be.
It would hilarious. It would be cool. It would be great. It would also be a slap in the face for Giants fans. I want to say the Lions just because I was so hype about them last year, but I'm not going to say the Lions. I really want to see the Rams go back one more time. I think this is Matt Stafford's got just a little bit of gas left in the tank, but I think his time's coming. So I'd like to see him go one more time. And then I think the Rams as a team are really going to start to suffer the consequences of having an elderly team. So I'd like to see the Rams go, and I'd like to see the Bengals go. I'd like to see the Rams Bengals. That would be, or the Texans, just because
Rams Bengals again.
Yeah, I want to see it again, but I want Joey B to win this one.
I think this is a no-brainer. Texans Packers. That would be electric. You got both of these ridiculous offenses. Everyone's like 19 years old. It'd be fucking hilarious, and it would be awesome. So if the Chiefs don't make it, I'm going for Texans Packers.
All right, noted. Gentlemen, I appreciate you joining the show today. I appreciate all the brainiacs out there that have tuned in to hear us blabber and talk and chat about NFL football. So thank you guys so much for coming. Go check out ericashealthypets.com. Use code LB20 for 20% off. If you enjoy the show, I'm telling you, if you got a little pet at home, one, they're going to love it. They're going to love the treats or the oils or whatever you might purchase. But also, number 2, you're supporting the show if you do that. So I truly do appreciate it. And that's it. Hit the subscribe button. Go tell all your friends and family and your little ones, your grandparents. Tell them all about LeatherBrainz. Go check out LeatherBrainz.com. I love you guys. We
are
out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tune into our new releases every week on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out LeatherBrainz.com for all of your fantasy football needs. And remember, Brainiacs, a championship should be more than a fantasy.